right, we're going to call the special work session to order. March 10th, 2011 is not 4:45 p.m., it's 5:20 p.m. So first, second, wow. We're still having the Tuesday night meeting now. The second item is citizen comments for items that are not addressed during on the work session agenda. Is anyone present that wants to make a statement or a comment? I see none. We'll continue on with item 3, discussion and consideration of the drought management plan, and we've got Mark Hilty here to introduce CDM.
Yes, sir. We have been tasked by the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation to develop a drought management plan, and we've asked CDM to support us in that role, and we're here to present to you the current draft of it. The plan is due to TDEC in draft form at the end of this month, so we're presenting it to you all for comment and review. And look forward to bringing it back to you the second meeting in March. So, third meeting, excuse me.
Thanks, Mark. We're just going to touch on a couple of high points real quick. The key thing here is y'all are in really good shape with where you are, particularly with some of the adjustments y'all made after the 2007 drought. But we'll just run through a couple of pieces that are summarized, sort of summarize the document you have in draft form. As Mark said, there were 118 different entities within the state that were required by TDEC to put in a drought management plan as part of an overall statewide drought sort of identification and response action. Primarily, the keys to both identify indicators of where you may be in a drought, establish clear courses of action if you were to be in that situation. Primarily, also to assure that obviously you can meet the water supplies of your city population and provide a basis for regional support as well, in y'all's case with the water that you purchase from Harper Valley. This is just a generalized outline. We met with TDEC, went over this outline, got sort of approval before we sort of started going through the process to make sure that we were covering the key pieces they wanted to touch on. The main 3 things at the bottom that you'll see with the approach, primarily to touch on the effectiveness of your existing bylaws that you have in place. Look at both your local triggers and the regional-wide triggers associated with any drought instances, and also touch on some of the distribution pressure concerns that were of a concern back in 2007 during the drought. This sort of outlines your existing emergency status 1 and status 2 protocol that you already have in place in your bylaws. This is really the key point of your drought management plan currently. Obviously, with the new ARAP permit, which requires that there be at least 10 CFS in the river and that you never withdraw more than 20% of the total flow, that along with your reservoir levels, your reservoir level and your tank level sort of defined as planned currently. We looked at sort of, this is a good piece of information because as Kurt could tell you, a lot of these drought management plans across the nation, they may be good in word, but a lot of times indeed when you actually get into the situation, they don't really cause a response. What you're seeing on the screen is sort of the responsitory actions back in 2007 based on your current bylaws. As you can see, as the flow began to spike, the blue being in the 2008, which is more of an average year, you can see in the red how you had a tremendous spike sort of toward the end of May during that year as the drought sort of came on. You then went to voluntary conservation. You can see how that sort of brought you back down to sort of matching what your average year would have been during that drought period. Then, as you see, as you went through the process of press release implementing stage 1, it slowly began to come down maybe slightly, but what really seemed at that point then, a couple weeks later, you made an order to cut off and lock all irrigation meters throughout the city, and you can see how that drastically reduced it below even what the average year would be until late, maybe mid-September, when the press release lifting the status 1 storage brought you back to about average. So as you see, your current bylaws have really allowed y'all to move in a way where you can truly cause some effect from the things that you're wanting to see.
Let me say to you,
yes, ma'am.
Most of us were not here
yes,
in
ma'am.
2007 whenever we had that drought. So I don't know what you're talking about when you say the bylaws.
The Title 18 prescribes in it the emergency conservation measures that are required. So when we implement water restrictions, I guess is the term that's commonly used. So that that's what he's referring to. So when we implemented the restrictions in 2007, what you'll see, and again, the red line represents the usage we were going through. The blue is about the average of what we go through. When we did implement restrictions, it did bring us back down to average in general. And then when we had the order to cut off the irrigation-only meters, it brought us down to a level below that of our typical summer during that time
Are we
period.
saying anytime we go beyond the typical summer drought, that we're going to have to do those things again?
No, ma'am.
That's what I'm asking about.
No, ma'am. No, it's dependent on our ability to maintain water in our system. So if we're able to do that, then, if our demands go beyond what they typically are, we're able to maintain water in the system, there's no need to go to restriction.
And we've done some things to,
Yes, ma'am.
to
We've done
handle that much better than we had.
considerable amount of projects.
But it's more than that.
Yes, ma'am.
We can now get more money from more water from Harvard
Right.
Valley.
We've improved the vaults, we've improved transmission mains to the south primarily has been the issue. So yes, we've had many improvements.
Because having to make that requirement for restriction
It's
is really
very
very
difficult.
difficult
Yes,
for a
ma'am.
lot- for a lot of people.
I mean, obviously, this is not implementing in any case that you would want to do this. This is just a requirement that you have to have in place, just in case it were to
Have a
happen.
plan.
Right.
And I think this is really important because one of the things that we want to tell you tonight is that your bylaws that you have in place are effectively your drought management plan. And this data that you have from 2007, although that was an unpleasant year, it's fortunate to have that data because it proves that these bylaws actually work. That both the voluntary and the mandatory restrictions had a measurable effect on water demand. And when I say measurable, those are percentages that most states would recognize as being commendable. To see that kind of major reduction on the order of 5, 10, 15% of the demand during peak summer months, that's commendable. So these protocols that you have in place already are basically your drought management plan. And our job in formulating this for the state is to show that they work and are effective. And I think that's what this data is showing you.
The other thing we had to look at, obviously, since a large amount of your water comes from Harpeth Valley Utilities, is that y'all's drought management would kick in, that your bylaws would kick in locally before they would ever have any problems in Harpeth Valley, thus not having to get to the situation where they are calling you up one day and saying, hey, we're running low on water, we need the city of Franklin to shut down on their water use. And what you'll see is over the past 50 years, Harpeth Valley pulling directly out of the Cumberland River near Cheatham Dam, there's only been one day, I believe, in the last 50 years where there's been what would be considered a drought situation at the Cheatham Dam back in the mid-'70s, I believe. And to be considered a drought condition at Cheatham Lake, it has to be over a 48-hour period, correct, Kurt?
Right.
But
So
we have had required, restrictions on water use more than one time since 2000, and certainly since.
And that's where you'll see that number. That's where you'll see the number based on the simulation records for the city, based on the Harpeth. That instance occurs about 20 to 30% of the time. There's a 20% probability over the last 50 years as well of that situation occurring from strictly a supply purpose from the Harpeth
In Franklin.
in Franklin.
And let's keep in mind the measure that was implemented. It was don't water your yard,
Right.
don't wash your car.
Right.
Correct.
Not much more than that, if anything, right?
Correct.
Shut off all the landscape watering.
Well, yeah, don't water your yard, don't wash your car.
Right, page 13, you have
Okay, so,
fill in swimming pool.
Correct.
all right.
That's the primary. Our primary driver is irrigation in the summer. So yes. One thing that I just want to make sure everyone's clear on. This relates to drought. There again are this doesn't. We do have coordination with Harpeth Valley in terms of operational issues and things of that nature. But again, I just wanted to make sure that this focuses purely on drought.
Not on distribution or supply. I mean,
Correct.
that doesn't mean that you won't be able to get water. It just means drought conditions in the Harpeth would be to the situation where you may not be able to pull water out of the Harpeth anymore.
Correct.
Well, that's totally different.
And this is important too, Zach, just real quick before you go on, because if Harpeth Valley were to call you, they've developed a drought management plan too. They're required to do that. And one of the things that the state has asked both Franklin and Harpeth Valley to do is to collaborate on these. And if Harpeth Valley were to call Franklin and say, we have reached our drought trigger, which we reach once in 50 years, we've reached that, and we need you to start to conserve, you would already be there. And that's what this analysis shows, that you'd already be in conservation mode, and that's important to know.
Also, the other key point that I think y'all sort of touched on with some of your comments so far is there were also some concerns with some of the distribution pressures back in 2007, which have been addressed through different projects that have been done, as well as being able to reroute some of the water through the water plant to increase some of the pressure, just due to the fact that both your connection points, obviously, with Harpeth Valley are in the northwest portion of the town, where Long Lane and Columbia Avenue tanks are both in the southeast portion of town, and therefore it just has to travel that much further in your system. So,
do we have a cross connection now that we did not have then?
We are working on one on Long Lane with Mill Crofton. That's not installed yet.
As I recall, one of the problems we had was that no matter how much water we might have been able to get from Harpeth Valley, some of our customers were served strictly by water treatment plant water, and we were having trouble with that.
When the water treatment plant goes offline, the pressures in Long Lane and Columbia Avenue deteriorate quickly, historically. So the transmission main that's going in currently on Downs Boulevard should aid with that. Also, we actually do have I would term it as a temporary interconnection with Mill Crofton in Long Lane area. We're looking at a permanent connection with them. It's metered and valved that can be operated by either utility district, depending on who's having the issue. So, yes, be sure we've improved transmission in that area, Southeast project as well, the booster station on Old Paytonsville Road. So we've had a lot of focus down there.
and that's really what the driver for all this is to promote more regional cooperation, regional connections, et cetera. So in summary, TDEC has reviewed and approved the outline that we sort of went forward with this drought management plan with. We will obviously, once we get feedback from the staff and any comments that y'all may have, we'll revise this document and once voted on the 22nd by y'all, we'll present it back to TDOT for their comments again. The Franklin drought indicators, as we mentioned, are well-defined. You have a well-defined response measures already in place. Your triggers are more conservative than the triggers that exist for Harpeth Valley, so therefore you should never be in a situation where y'all get a call from them asking you to immediately turn down your usage. And you've been able to address a lot of TDEC's principals' concerns associated with some of the low pressures that they know were reported back in 2007. So, as Mark said, this draft is due to TDEC by March 31st to meet the requirement that was placed on the city based on that requirement of the promoting the drought management.
And it really doesn't recommend anything that you don't already have in your bylaws, in your system. Yeah,
I think that's the key thing. We're not, based on everything we've looked at, there's no reason for y'all to do anything different than what you already have codified now. So if you have any other questions or comments, and feel free, once you have a chance to look through that, to get back with Mark or us.
This is part of our integrated water report.
Right. It was the reason that Mark asked us to help with this is because it is very closely tied to a lot of the work we're already doing, some of the work we were doing on the rivers, the study of the Harpeth River, some of the water treatment plant review, et cetera. So it fell in place with doing that sort of in conjunction with the integrated water resource plan.
One of the components of this drought management plan required a bit of some distribution system modeling, which was already being performed under the integrated plan. I felt it was a good, synergy, for lack of a better term, to have them work through it and evaluate this one step further. So,
thanks, guys. Good
Thank
job.
you.
thank you.
Okay, number 4, consideration of proposed ordinance 2011-07, an ordinance to update the City of Franklin road impact fees as presented in the 2010 Duncan Associates Road Impact Fee Study dated November 2010. Mr. Parker.
And I'll say just a couple things. We had touched base with you on this previously and drafted an ordinance based on some feedback from the board. We did also hold a work session with the design professionals group about a week ago, but wanted to invite that group and generally invite other stakeholders who had participated in the discussion you had back in November also to comment on it. There are a few adjustments that were made to the proposed ordinance based on the discussion that happened a week ago, and where there seemed to be some consensus among that group, and also that made sense to staff in terms of how we might move forward. Give David a chance to touch base on some of the key points, and then really we wanted to have this as an opportunity for you to hear from other folks also who may be in the audience that want to comment about where we are with this draft ordinance at this time.
The main things that were touched on with the design professionals, et cetera, was concerning the grandfathering. You find that on page 7. We had already made some changes, but we refined them more after our meeting with them last Wednesday. And the main thing that we revised there was the number 7 for as residential. We did originally we did not have set up to have a grandfathering for the residential, but now we have are recommending a grandfathering for them, in that if it has a final plat approved, they go with the old plan. The other thing that we discussed a lot with them was the site plan approvals, et cetera, and staff, Mr. Girth and I, and we're looking at this, and we've put some limits on how long the site plan approval, an approved one would kick in, or allow them to keep the old impact fees. We discussed it with the design professionals. They seem to be okay with it. I think some of them are probably here tonight. If they're not, they can surely address that. But we've revised some of that, which it's on page 7 also. We're looking at section, I'm going to have to flip back to see what, it's 16-410, subparagraph 7, 8, 9, and then 10 is the main changes that you have not seen before. So that's the changes you have not seen before. So,
you want to talk about that right now? You want to talk all of them, and then we'll come back. Is that okay?
Either way you want to do it. I don't. It doesn't matter to me.
Okay. Well,
if you want to go ahead and go through, we've looked at some other things. We have not made any other substantial changes in what we're proposing with you. There were some discussions concerning exemptions, etc. Already included in the ordinance, the existing ordinance, etc. is allowance of exemptions by the board of mayor and aldermen. But point out that if you do exempt a piece of property, then exemptions are set. But if you want to do relief procedures, that's found on page 14 and 15, section 16-422. If the board chooses to vote to give relief, in other words, not the development not pay the full amount or not pay any at all, then the board has to supplement back out of some other fund into the road impact fund. That's already established, has been established since the road impact fee was originally approved. So we have not made any changes. There was discussions concerning that as far as allowing for low-income housing or affordable housing. I'm sorry, wrong definition. Affordable housing to be get some relief. But if you do that, then the ordinance has established that the board would have to make it up from another fund. So into the road impact fee fund. As far as exemptions, you have basically the only people that are exempt from this ordinance are entities that have taxing powers, and so that's kind of goes along with, if I'm not mistaken, Enabling Act.
Schools or something.
Schools. No. Franklin Special School District has taxing power. They do not pay. They're exempt. County schools are part of the county government, so they have not paid. Yeah, so any nonprofits and quasi-public that does not have taxing powers do pay. So, of course, federal government doesn't pay. State government doesn't pay.
IRS buildings and things like that.
Well, the RS building is being built, we'll be paying because they're not going to own the building. They're just leasing. So the developer will pay, but the IRS, I mean, it's not their building, so yes, they will pay. That's basically it. I think we've pretty well covered. Vernon, was there? Oh, there was one other thing. I'm sorry. We did have a change that Vernon looked at and brought to my attention yesterday, but he got it to me on page. Well, let me see if I can find it right quick. It's 407. It'd be on page 5, 16407, the applicability. He's requested that we tighten up that. I think it was covered enough by the definition of development, but Vernon thinks, and I don't disagree with him, that we change that to read, this chapter applies to all new development, additions to existing structures, and changes of uses which increase the intensity of use within the corporate limits of the city, unless such development is expressly exempt or differentiated. So it's just a further explanation.
From what we have here.
It's different than what's in here because yes. So I can get. It's on page 5.
But it's not there. It's just
it's.
Page 5.
We will have it before it comes to you for a vote. I mean, before it comes back, if you don't, that's an additional suggestion, so we'll have that change incorporated when it comes to you for the vote, which right now is on the agenda for the 22nd. Now, we have not heard or had any question or anything as far as how we've broken down the implementation of the fees themselves. It is right now in a three-stage implementation, as you can see from the exhibits at the end of the proposed ordinance. So
this is the arterial plus the right-of-way.
Right.
Approach is what's reflected here. Roughly, if you wanted to just do arterials, that first tier step is approximately that amount. Some adjustment, but if you were looking for a point of comparison, that's about
the increase from the first step, before the first step as proposed, would be would be about the same if you decided to do just arterials with not doing right away. And that's how we tried to break it down because there were some questions about that. So that is that one step. That's the first step.
Can I ask a specific, maybe as an example? When it says a change, I'm on page 7, first paragraph. It says when a change or expansion of land use or the redevelopment, replacement, or modification of the existing building or structure requires the issuance of a permit, the road impact fee shall be based upon the net increase in the impact fee for the new use as compared to the previous use. Let me do an example. Just take, and I don't want to advertise for anybody, but just take French's Shoes, which moved from the old Hill Shopping Center to Hillsborough Road. Do they pay? How do you? Is that what we're talking about here?
It is what you're talking about, but there was no increase there. It's still the same square footage and same basic use of the building. So it did not really change. So it was
so
no.
They did. So
the example that I like to throw out is we've had approved throughout the city over the years quite a few office warehouse spaces. And typically, when it's first done, the very first front part of a space is the office, with the majority of the space being warehouse. So you base the impact fee on the square footage for both of those uses. But then a lot of these particular spaces have been remodeled or petitioned off to be completely office. So you've changed the use. In that case, so and an office space use is quite a bit higher impact fee than a warehouse space use, as you can well imagine. So that's the change of use of what that's referred to.
Again, a net calculation.
Right, it's net. So if you deduct whatever is already existing when you do the first calculation, you deduct what they've already paid for the same use.
I think if you look into Exhibit A, you can see the different classifications. It's on page 16 of 17. And to expand on what David just said, that if you have, for example, an office use, okay, in a particular building, and they change to a restaurant, which is a different, you apply the difference as they make that change to the restaurant use. Per 1,000 square feet, as you can see in Exhibit A, you can see the difference in those fees because it's a more impacting use.
When you were talking about French's, and you said it was about the same, did you mean French's was the same as it was where it was before and now, or what the use of the building was?
Use of the building. Use of the building.
So generating the same.
Yes.
The same.
Trips.
And based on
Basically
Both retail use.
these uses, yes.
And what would the fee schedule fit in for an infill in an existing neighborhood street? A new building, new home, single family.
You want me to? I can. If you have
It was a structure there, maybe old, dilapidated.
If the structure was there, then it's replacing with the same, then there is no.
That's what I need.
As long as it's the same square footage.
But if it's bigger,
I'm thinking in the older neighborhoods where there is homes that is in bad repair that may eventually be torn down, a new structure goes there.
Well, now, single family to single family, there's no change. There's no change. Now, if it's a retail and you tear it down and build bigger, then they get credit for what they had, but you subtract that from whatever the new square footage would be. So
it would be based on square footage.
it's all based on square footage other than single family or other than residential.
Okay.
Square footage in use.
Yes, square footage use, I'm sorry.
Okay, back to whatever you're talking about, the grandfather parts, that was on
Page 7.
just looking at that number 9 that you added. Site plans would have to be submitted prior to July 11, 2011, approved prior to October 1, can pay the fee in effect at the time of submission of the site plan. But now, why are we saying that if they have a site plan, they will have had to start on it, though, because if you don't start on the site plan within a year, you're supposed to lose that.
Correct.
Okay. So this just means you need to have it built out
No.
in 3 years. In
Oh,
3
yes,
years?
I'm sorry.
In 3
Yes.
years? No, but I'm saying you have to start it. You have to start it within that first year, or else
To keep it current.
wait a minute,
keep it
Barney's
current.
saying no. Here's something else.
Here's the.
Or you have to have affirmative action by.
Right.
I would tell you what, we might need to take staff out of that.
Here's the reasoning for this, and this was discussed with the design professionals, and I do want to acknowledge, I know there's several that regularly attend, but very good dialogue in this. To keep the development current, what we are saying that if you have an approved site plan, okay, and the approved site plan is good for a year, and there's a possibility to get two 6 month extensions, that once you take out the first building permit, and let's say there's multiple buildings associated with that, you have to take out the last building permit within 3 years to have those same fees applied. Because if it goes beyond 3 years, we may have updated this by then, and the new fees should apply. So we can try to keep the building activity and impact fees closer related, because with the economy the way it is, if there is a multi-building development and they take out one building permit today, it could be 6, 7, 8 years before the last building permit is taken out because the site plan is still valid. Hopefully I explained that.
Yeah, that's right, because they've already built something.
That's correct.
But you're saying that within 3 years, any buildings within 3 years uses the old fee. But if
Correct.
it goes past 3 years, even though you've
Within-
activated it, can we say with getting one building
Right.
permit, after 3
And-
years, it's got to be the new?
And at the extreme, with that 3 years there, it could be right at the 5 years that we, by ordinance, have to do another update anyway. So that's sort of the
No,
reasoning
I
for
don't-
looking
I
at
don't
that.
guess.
at
I
those-
just wanted to
those
make
time
sure,
frames.
since I really had,
Right.
since we were talking about this as something new, I did want to make sure that the 1 year, you still had to have the one building, one permit within 1 year.
Well, do you have to build it?
You have to pull a building permit within a year unless you get one of the extensions, or the site plan approval expires. So that's what, so you have to build the
But
building
you
permit.
have to actually have the building on site finished.
Wait, how long is the
No.
building permit?
Building permit is good for 1 year unless the structure is larger, that takes a longer time. For example, a large hotel.
We want to open up, see if the audience,
Are
anybody-
I have some other questions I need to ask too.
I'm
If
sorry.
if they
Let's let
significantly
Michael-
modify site plans, is there any point that would need to be looked at?
That's a good question.
If they significantly modify
an
site
existing
plans.
site plan. Like if you come in and you say, well, we're only going to do this, but
But if you changed use, wouldn't that
That's
be
a good question.
The site plan is good as approved. If it meets one of the triggers, then you need to come back to get a reapproval of a site plan.
So it would
And it would be a new site plan.
what are those triggers?
Well, I would want to bring those in. I don't want to try to recite those from memory.
But an increase in square footage is what.
Could be.
the kind of
but-
things you've
What
seen
about
before,
design?
which change in densities or those kind of things?
Design?
Yeah, those kinds of things. So would that trigger a new site plan and then?
Well, now
that
the
makes-
design standards, if you're talking about the physical structure design, that wouldn't require a new site plan. Because those are part of our zoning ordinance and how buildings are built. If you're looking to do something different on your site that's a significant change, then you need to come in and resubmit.
Well, isn't design a significant change?
Well, if you're talking about design of the site, that would be a changing the buildings,
Whatever
changing.
got approved.
Right.
Whatever got approved. If you change that, don't you have to come back?
Then you would come back, yes.
And it's a new approval date. Once
New
it gets
approval.
approved again, that is the new date.
New
Not the
approval.
old,
A year
not the
from
original one, it's the new date, the new approval date.
Yeah. When I say design, you look at the architecture of a building, that wouldn't require that because our design standards allow that flexibility.
Would be good to see maybe what kinds of things trigger that for a new.
That's going to be coming back to you in not too long. A group of the design professionals have been meeting with Alderman Peterson and staff to talk about the concept plan and regulating plan and rezoning process and looking at that to how we can mesh those together a little bit better. So that'll be forthcoming here. And
Yeah, not having just the bubble. Having a little bit more than the bubble.
Thank you, thank you.
Do you have more questions?
Yes, I do.
All right, go ahead with those, because I want to
Sure.
give the opportunity.
Okay,
to anybody.
offsets for right-of-way, originally it was, let's see, this would be, I think also, maybe this is page 12, let me look, because the one that I had didn't have the numbers on the pages, so.
Well, when I first did that, I couldn't get the numbers to come up, but since then have gotten it. But you are on page 11.
Okay, I'm on page 11 then.
I think it's the first time it comes up.
No, I've got a new one, but I'm looking at my, the thing where it marked out, on offsets, 16,417.
16,417.
Okay, the very first one there, that is on page 11 then, it says the city pursuant to duly adopted, that's number 2, it's number 2, requires the dedication of right-of-way beyond 30 feet from the center line. it took out beyond 30 feet from the center line, so this implies that if you are dedicating right-of-way of any size...
What this ordinance is
But I don't
based
know.
on, as Mr. Stuckey said, is that we're basing it on arterials with allowing cost of right-of-way. So it is including the cost of the right-of-way. So if we're going to include the cost of the right-of-way, then we have to take out the 30 feet beyond center line, because well, unless you change it back. If you don't have the cost of the right-of-way as being a part of the fee, they don't get offsets for anything over the 30, they don't get offsets for up to the 30 feet off center line. So if you're going to have the cost of the right-of-way included in the calculation of the fees, you're going to allow offsets for all the right-of-way, any of the right-of-way.
So in other words,
cost.
we're going to have offsets for the 30 feet of right-of-way that we never had before.
Correct.
Which, I mean, that was something that we were getting automatically without having to pay for it.
Because you were not calculating your impact fee using the cost of right-of-way.
But that means that actually somebody could have an arterial through their property and they would get offsets for everything there, and like as if they never built a road. I mean, because think about it, if you have a piece of property and you're having to have a street through it, I mean, we're saying arterial here, but you would have to have some money from the development to build the street through it. So whenever we're saying here, we're going to give them an offset even for the original 30 feet from the center line, which would have been for any road of any size there.
That's correct, but again, the fee itself is based on the cost of what that right-of-way would be. So when we're paying a lot of money for right-of-way, and that's what the fee then is, using the calculation of right-of-way costs. So if you're going to have the cost of right-of-way included in the fee itself, you've got to allow for the offset should somebody give you that right-of-way. So it's just like if they build the road, they're getting offset for the cost of the construction. You're basically throwing the cost of the right-of-way into the cost of the project. It's now project cost, and it's in the project cost is what these fees have been based on. That includes that cost of right-of-way. So yes.
Okay, so let's compare that though to any other street that doesn't fit this category of arterial. Don't they have to give us so many feet of right-of-way for any other road?
The 30 foot calculation from center line was based on that is the average 60 foot right-of-way is the average right-of-way for a collector road.
Okay.
So
for a collector.
For collector
So
roads,
if they're-
yes. So it was looked at as if they're giving something more, since we were going from a collector to an arterial. If they give more than just what that collector was, then they could get the offset for that. But now we're talking about using the calculations of the total cost. So because we do require dedication of that 60 feet for collectors, et cetera. So that's really more of the legal fairness type situation.
Okay, but you're saying you build a collector, you have to give the city the 30
60 feet.
60 feet.
Well, total, but we had it set up 30 feet because they may be only
at no
one
cost
side.
to the city. At no cost to the city. Whereas now, if you do an arterial, you can get offset for the entire thing. I mean, you can get an offset
for the cost of the right-of-way.
For the 60 feet that you're getting. I mean, I'm not in favor of including the right-of-way in here, and here's one of the problems with it. Because really, you're better off if you have the arterial. You get the offset back for the 60 feet that the person building a collector would have to give to the city, free and clear to the city. I wanted to make sure about that, but that is my interpretation. That is what's happening. Because if you build the collector, you have to give the 60 feet of right-of-way.
Correct.
To the city, no offset, no nothing, you have to give it.
Correct.
Whereas if you do the arterial, then you get paid back from the road impact fees for the 60 feet that you would be giving on a collector.
So you're better off getting a collector than an arterial?
No. the city's better off with a
Arterial
collector.
without.
But the developer's better off building the arterial and getting the money back.
Not really, because of the cost of difference of all of it,
But I mean, if you're doing offsets, then that cost is going to come back. I know what you're saying, that the offset doesn't overcome it. It doesn't pay for all of it. But still, you are better off there if we're talking about that the right-of-way costs so much.
Well, they get a better offset, but they also have a much higher overhead.
they're paying.
But wait, they don't just get the offset for the extra 60, the 60 feet of right-of-way. They get offsets for the actual building of the road. So it's,
Which is a pretty expensive thing to do in the case of an arterial versus a collector.
It is. But however, we're also, building a lot of arterials ourselves, or planning to.
Well, and
that costs us a lot of money.
Absolutely right. Not every development is large enough to have an arterial to fall in that, but our residents and maintaining a certain quality of life in our community requires us to invest in arterials, and that's where those fees come into play for those developments that aren't including an arterial. So it's really a community-wide issue.
We don't get into how many arterials we built. I mean, let's be serious about quality of life in the city, building a lot of roads or expanding the traffic capacity of a lot of roads. We don't have a good track record on that.
Do you have other questions?
My other one was to do with, go back and get my other, and I have asked, does this mean any right-of-way there? And we are saying that you've got the effective dates on now. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Not any questions from the audience? Seeing none. Oh, I'm sorry. Come up, Mort. You're hidden by the camera.
I just have a few comments.
Sure.
One of them are. Yeah.
Plug him up.
What are you going to do?
Wire him up.
I'm not very good at this.
There you go.
Let me deal with on the change of use. We had discussed that in our meeting that we had, and what happens is, like for instance on Main Street, we have a lot of offices on the first floor, and they're being. And one of the objectives of trying to revitalize Main Street is that we put retail or restaurants on the first floor and put offices on the second floor. And a lot of people are doing this. So by putting an impact fee on them, you would discourage that. Also, as when we were discussing this, I had suggested just for the central, that we exempt the central business area, or central, what is it called, the area,
Central business
the
district.
planning area. And Brian Echols pointed out that there were a lot of, why show favoritism to any area, and I agree with that. We've got a lot, if you go out to CPS, which was used as a factory, and a lot of that is being converted to an office, and some of it is being converted to retail. So we have a lot of reuse that is going on in the city, mainly because of the economy and because of changing, manufacturing is leaving our city. So this would create another burden. I think that what I suggest is that we just wipe out the change of use, because the change of use to me is changing from. In other words, what you're going to do is you're taking distressed properties and you're going to make them more distressed, and you're going to make it harder for them to come back. And you're also taking properties, for instance, if you got a property where the downtown, we want to make a walkable community. Well, if you got nothing but offices and on the first floor, and you're trying to put grocery stores or even or even residential on the second floor, then you're discouraging that. So how are you going to get a walkable community? We do not have a walkable downtown, mainly because we don't have a mix of uses. and then with distressed property. So my suggestion is that you take that paragraph completely out and not charge an impact fee for change of use. The other thing that I wanted...
I'll make sure we... So if you've got the old gray drug building, I'll use examples. You got the old gray drug building, and somebody comes in and wants to put in a restaurant now.
Right. They would have to pay
They would
additional...
have to pay a significant impact fee in order to do that, correct?
Exactly.
Yes, and they are significantly increasing the
Well,
traffic.
and I understand they're significantly, but it's also vacant.
But isn't that what this is about? This is road impact fee, and it's not just for right there. It's for anything.
Well, yeah.
Are we talking about distressed properties downtown? I mean,
No, we're talking about distressed properties like CPS. CPS is distressed property. It's vacant.
What's
That's
CPS?
the old CPS factory out there on Columbia Avenue. What was it called? Lasco.
You've dated yourself.
I'm sorry. I do that all the time. I'm a dated person. But anyway.
Chicago printed string.
But so it's not only for that, but I mean, I realize that what you're talking about is trying to generate money for roads.
Because we don't have enough money for roads now.
I just want to make sure that
But if you're discouraging economic development, then you won't have, I don't care if you triple or quadruple the impact fees, if you discourage, it's like the Congress, if they're going to increase taxes to increase revenue.
Don't go there.
Well, I mean, it's the same darn thing.
No.
It is. You're increasing traffic.
Okay, so if we relax this and all these things come in, but you can't actually get there because the traffic is so bad, what have we accomplished?
Well, but you're going to generate. Hold it.
All right. I think Mort's before. Do you have any other comments to make?
Okay.
Yeah, if you want to make some other comments, we'd be glad to
I would be glad to make other comments.
Before you go on with that, this was discussed last Wednesday. There was not a consensus that we needed to change it. Brian Eccles is saying, why would his thing was, why would you give one area preferential treatment over another area, et cetera. So that's the reason we haven't recommended any change. We could not get a consensus.
Well, I think we do have a consensus. Because I agreed with Brian. I said he was right. We were doing it everywhere. And that's exactly what I'm proposing. And I think we did have a consensus.
I want to say one thing, sir. I'm sorry, I have to bug out. I think we have to be very careful that we don't stifle economic development. So we need to maybe go back and take a really good look at this and say, how is this really affecting economic development? How should we deal with this? And then just jump to conclusions and just say we're going to do it. Mark, we have a walkable downtown. We certainly do. But I understand your point, what you're trying to make, is that change. So I think it deserves to be really studied.
That leads to my next point. Okay,
go ahead.
My next point is that I'm afraid we don't know what the economy is going to do. There was just an article about 3 developers that are going to build office buildings, thinking about building office buildings. If we initiate this before this could discourage that from happening. The price of oil is going through the roof. Yep. The price of gasoline is going through the roof. We don't know what's going to happen. So my suggestion is, instead of doing a 3-year plan, put it off for another year. Let's look at the economy. Let's see what's going to happen. Let's do a study. And also, when we were looking at this, back there in 2007, when we did the other study, we had proposed to do what is called a proportionality study. And a proportionality study takes in consideration transit, the size of the building, and then what the actual traffic is for residential uses. And it was not done. And it is a method for taking in consideration for low-income housing that they actually do have produce less traffic than upper-income housing. And what it would do, it would adjust the impact. In other words, a 1,000-square-foot house pays the same impact fee as a 5,000-square-foot house. That's what it is in the ordinance right now. And there's no way that if we have a house built in Hard Bargain that is going to create the same kind of traffic that you have if you build it in, Heath Place or Ladd or wherever. And I'm asking that, number one, you put it off for a year, and number two, you do a proportionality study to take in consideration affordable housing.
Thanks for your comments there, Mark. Go ahead.
I just want to make sure, I didn't see any exemption for the business downtown. Okay. I just wanted to confirm, because it was mentioned. I didn't see it. It's not in the.
And I'm suggesting you do it for all change of uses, not just downtown. I was only using downtown as a perfect example of why you need to deal with it. And I agree with what Brian said. You don't need to just exempt one part of town. Because we've got shopping centers, we've got factories, old warehouses that are basically distressed property. They're vacant. And if we got vacant property, they're not going to create any impact fees. I hate to tell you that, but that's not going to happen.
You have to be careful, too, if you change of use, if the use puts on additional traffic and in use, then you have to be careful that, you might want to stipulate in there, if we're interested in doing something like this, stipulate in there how that change of use, if it creates a lot more, if the use is quite different, we may have to address that.
Well, one way to do that, though, is if it's turn lanes or traffic signal or some other way for traffic control or augmentation measures.
Require that.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think there's a lot we have to look at.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for listening.
Yes, sir. I don't see any other comments from the audience.
I want to have some general comments about this. Now, I was asking questions before. One of the things that
we need to start defining comments.
Well, I'm sorry.
You weren't done.
That's the general comment.
Because I want to talk about including the right-of-way. That means that most of these uses double their impact fees. And to bank on what Mort said and some other people have said, I think this is not a good time economically to more than double the road impact fees. Still have a question about how they decided that the money that it costs to do that is like, what did we say, half again or more than what we were doing 3 years ago? Because we've had some projects come in that were bid under what we had projected them to be. But I if we took out the road to include the right of way, then you're talking about a much smaller percentage, about the 25% increase there, and just let that go for the 3 years. And look at it again. I just think it's not a good time to, even over 3 years, because after year one, really, it goes to what, 75? Well, no, that's not. Yeah, 75% increase after 1 year.
Well, I'm sympathetic to not making things any harder than they are. However, Mr. Barnhill and I'm sure Mr. Barnhill will remember that we were all told, if you do this in the first place, or if you make these revisions, or if we've heard this before. And I did not, over time, see that the predictions of such dire consequences came true. Second of all, if you don't do it now, okay, but if things get better, and you then start talking about doing it, Mr. Stein and others will come back in and tell you, oh, don't hurt us now. We're just getting back together. We're just getting back on our feet. Don't knock us down now. And then when it's rolling really good, if it does, they'll come in and tell you the same thing again. They're never, I'm not trying to be antagonistic, but they're never going to come in and tell you it's a good time to tax them. Never, ever. So, when we did a massive overhaul of the road impact fees, 10 years ago now.
At least.
We had, at that time, we had a whole lot more developers in here. We were at the, heading into what became ultimately the top of the market.
Right.
And they told us all, you'll kill us. You'll kill us if you do this. We phased it in. No one got beat up over that. You know, and beyond. And look, to be honest, the developers are going to pass this cost along. That's what will happen. And we are either a desirable enough community that they will continue to do business here, or we're not. But one of the things that makes us either a desirable community or not is our ability to absorb traffic better than we do. So if you say, let's don't do this now because it'll hurt the economy or it'll drag what might have been done down, then you will get traffic with no offsetting ability to pay for it. You will degrade the quality of life, and you will make the next people that consider locating here view it less favorably. So it's kind of, you kind of have to decide whether or not you want to try to make growth pay for itself and stay in that philosophy, or do you want to start, and I understand the request is to delay it, not to repeal it, but there's never going to be a day when the people who pay this first before passing it along come in here and tell us, now's a good time.
I have a couple of comments. One of them is that, not said by me, but said by many economists, that this is the worst recession since the Great Depression. I will tell you specific results that I have from working on the Planning Commission. Now, our material is this big when it used to be this big.
It used to come in a crate.
That's right, it did. So I'm saying this is not what it was like in 2000 or whenever, I guess, what was it, 1987, whenever the road impact fees were first imposed. So this is not your usual time frame. But the other thing is, I'm saying if we just didn't include the right-of-way here, we could meet that. I mean, that was the 25% that they're saying if we don't include the right-of-way, we would cover what they're saying is needed. And I think that part, I could go with. It's just that when you start including the right-of-way, that you get all of this additional. And I'm just saying, to me, the timing is not good for that. And as I say, I'm not somebody who's has taken certain developer sides very often, and so. But this is one time when I think fairness kind of says, "Don't do this right now." And as I say, we could do, based on what we had done before, what is being requested. It's just that we made this major change that's proposed here. And so if we didn't go with a major change, then we would be fulfilling what they say is the additional money needed.
The history of the road impact fee in Franklin is that it's always bargained. I mean, we several years ago, I think it was now maybe 10 years ago, when we asked Duncan and Associates to just go back out and update the input figures. Just go out and tell us what the cost of building roads now is. What would have happened, just not changing the formula, not even adding right-of-way, just updating the figures would have been a massive hit.
Well, because it was 10 years old.
Right. And so what happened then was we made a deal, basically. I mean, I'm not being facetious. We made a deal. We phased it in. It was absorbed. I doubt that there was one project that didn't get done that would have otherwise gotten done on account of the road impact fee. And I'm not unwilling to be flexible, but stalling this process for a full year or exempting people, if you want to create an incentive to reutilize or repurpose buildings, then part of what Mr. Stein said makes sense. And I don't necessarily think that that's a bad plan. But I'm not going to be terribly motivated by anybody just saying, stop. So if you want to take the right of way out, if you want to incentivize repurposing buildings, those things are not unreasonable requests. I do not favor just putting this on the shelf for a year. That will only kick the can down the road, because what will then happen is, as Mr. Stein correctly pointed out, the costs of road building are not going to go down.
Well, they have to. They have.
Under the circumstances as they currently exist, it does not appear that they will. Okay, I think the cost of road building might have,
asphalt is going.
Yes, the cost of road building might have bottomed.
Well,
and if we kick this can down the road for a year, hoping that things will get better, what will really happen is the underlying cost to be inputted will likely continue to rise, and the gap will be that much bigger. Now, if you want to shave the edges and round it off, I can live with that. But kicking this down the road a year does not sound to me like a prudent bit of fiscal planning for the city.
Wait, I'm not advocating that we don't do anything. I'm advocating that we do this with the added requirement, that the added update, but not including the right-of-way. And that does mean, I don't know, 30% increase. And by the way, let me say, this was, I know what you're talking about. A number of years ago, it had been probably 10 years since it had been updated, or close to that.
Close to it. More than that,
okay, listen, we updated this less than 4 years ago. We updated it 3 years ago, so it's not like we had all the catch up in the world.
That's true, but entertaining the idea of just calling this meeting off and pushing it a year just means the next spike will be larger.
No, I'm not advocating that at all.
Even if all you do is update the numbers.
Do you have any other points to make?
As I say, my position is that I would be in favor of updating the fee without the right-of-way.
So arterial only.
Arterial only is not a given.
If we include right-of-way and the developers get offset, what is the percentage of the offset that they actually get back from?
A development gets 100% offset for costs that are eligible to be offset for his development only, for his own. I mean, he can't go out and add another development or get something from another development.
Just on his boundary.
Yeah, just on what his development would produce as far as road impact fees.
Would it ever amount to more than what the fee is?
We never write a check.
No, we don't. No.
So best case scenario for developers.
He can, if he has eligible offsets for $1 million and he only produces $600,000, he's out $400,000.
I just have a question.
Now, as far as the right-of-way, though, and I understand it's a big jump, and we're using the calculation of right-of-way cost right now as far as what's being proposed. And right now, though, in looking at what's being discussed, right now we do not include any right-of-way cost in our calculation for road impact fees. But anything over 60 feet for a total right-of-way width or over 30 foot for half of it, we're giving offsets for right-of-way cost by ordinance. So
I have a question that just occurred to me, because we're talking about building the arterial. The city's talking about funding the building arterial. Does that mean that if we go through somebody's land, we're going to give them an offset for that 60 feet? Even though they're not building the road? It does, doesn't it?
If we go through somebody's land and we're building it, we're buying the right-of-way. That's the cost of the right-of-way. That's how we're getting the cost of the right-of-way. It's what we're having to pay for right-of-way when we go through something.
But wait, they would have given the 60 feet.
No.
Right?
No, we would have bought the right-of-way.
No, we would have purchased all of it.
You're saying that
If we build a road, we build an arterial road and we're going to get right-of-way off of a piece of property, we purchase the whole right-of-way. We pay for it.
So it says the city, though, requires the dedication of right-of-way.
That's from a developer on his
That's what I
on
mean.
his
That's
property.
what I
Now,
mean.
if he's building off-site of his development from somebody else, he's buying the right-of-way.
I understand that, but
He's paying
but
for it,
what
and you
you're-
will
but
give him an
I'm
offset.
trying to ask you, if we build the road, they didn't have to give the 30 feet from the center line as a part of their development?
If you own the piece of property I'm coming through your piece of property with an arterial road for the city of Franklin. City of Franklin, and it's a 120-foot wide right-of-way that we need.
No, but let's just say.
We're going to pay for a 120-foot right-of-way all the way through your property. No, we cannot force an individual to give us 60 foot of right-of-way.
But okay, but if they're building a collector, they will be forced to give us 6 feet of right-of-way free and clear to us.
If we're building the collector.
No, I'm saying if they're building it.
But that's not an apples to apples that you're talking about.
But I thought that you were saying that if there's an arterial, then they have to give us the 60 feet, and we pay the additional beyond the 30 feet?
We will give them offsets for the additional right-of-way over the 60 feet.
Over the 60
or 30
feet.
foot if they're only half of it.
Gotcha.
We do not have calculated in the fee itself. There's never been a right-of-way cost calculated in that fee. So we're giving an offset for something that we're not getting paid for from the fee, basically is what it boils down to. If it's over 60 feet.
Our road impact fee is calculated based on construction costs,
correct,
not including the underlying right-of-way that you had to buy to begin with. Okay. However, notwithstanding that, and as part of the political compromise that was reached, we have been giving offsets for the right-of-way.
Some of the right-of-way.
Some of the right-of-way. Okay?
But now we're giving offsets for all of it.
Well, and this was just one of those rounding off the rough edges and making it an easier pill to swallow that gets done.
Okay.
I'm not being crass about it. I'm just giving you the historical context. This entire thing gets bargained and rebargained every few years.
Let's move on. The good news is number 5 is going to be removed.
Oh, Don.
Oh, number 5. I just had 2 things.
I had a couple of comments too.
No. I just
I took a look at
Number 6, charter change for filling vacancies. This is of interest. Let's go.
Yeah.
Okay. We actually have 2 ordinances, but only one got noticed in the paper, but we can just touch on it because it's going to be back before you to be voted on. That one is the resolution for
sidewalk.
Oh, so this is not even up?
Well, it wasn't noticed on the actual agenda.
It was just the vacancy was listed.
Yeah, just the vacancy was listed on the agenda. But
we had talked to you about that previously.
Right, and
it didn't match
the sidewalks.
Let's go ahead with which one you want to talk about.
I was talking about the sidewalks.
Okay, go ahead.
It's a more simple one.
Number -17.
We're just making.
Let's go simple first then.
We're just putting it back to what we do right now. The ordinance or the charter requires that adjacent owners repair and maintain their sidewalks, but we don't actually do that. So since we don't do that, we're just going back into the charter and changing it to say that we will do that.
Good.
It just seems silly to have something in there that we don't actually do.
And never have.
So we're just going back in and fixing that.
All right.
That's the simple one.
Question on that one? I'm sorry, but
did you raise your hand? Go ahead.
He did ask.
Is this going to include such as snow removal, et cetera?
No, there is a section in there that talks specifically about that. This does not. This means like actual fixing the property. There's a whole other section that talks about removal of debris, snow, and ice.
I have pictures from my son in Boston where the snow that they had to remove from the sidewalk is taller than the girlfriend's head.
So
no, that does not include that.
All right.
So the general everyday maintenance, they have to do that still.
The one detail that I think might need to be worked in here, I don't want to be in the position of having to repair a sidewalk that a property owner dug up or broke. If they drive a Bobcat over it, or so I mean, just I'm not looking at the whole thing in context, but reading just this, it appears to me that somebody could tear up a sidewalk and then call us and say, "Come fix this."
I can add that in.
I can if it's the natural decay, if it's a natural deterioration, or if it's damaged in a project that we're doing, fine. But if the property owner damages or
I think we're good with that.
yeah, I mean, that, it should go without saying that if somebody destroyed a street sign, we wouldn't not make them reimburse us for it.
Exclude damage by the citizen. If they damage it on their own.
If the abutting property owner has damaged the property by running a bobcat over it or
Yes.
something, we shouldn't have to go out.
So we're just going to add that in there.
That's true.
What about if the neighbor of the abutting property owner?
Well, we'll
does?
figure it out. I'm just saying it doesn't fall on us by default
Right,
if
yeah.
someone deliberately damaged it.
Right.
I agree with that. We can change that.
And as we go forward, we're still going to come forward with a sidewalk policy and show the implications of creating a budget for maintenance, ongoing maintenance from the city, that naturally deterioration, and for new infill pieces. And we hope to bring some of that forward, maybe even next week, but ultimately we'll get that to you in several weeks, a month or so.
Okay, so the next one is the resolution regarding vice mayor and vacancies in office. We changed the vice mayor section to read, "The vice mayor shall take the oath of mayor and serve as mayor." Because before it wasn't very clear. I think the intent was there. We just missed a couple words. So we were just clearing up the intent. In C, we're adding that so long as a vacancy occurs within a year, one calendar year of a scheduled election, you can vote to fill it in the next regularly scheduled election. If it's outside of the year, you have to either fill it by a vote of the members of the board or by special election. There's only one other city that does it that way, and that's Metro. Almost everybody else does it within 6 months.
Metro, though, says it does not hold a special election for at-large.
That's true.
And this does not say that.
It does not say that.
Well, I think I'm okay with a year. What I would like to make clear is that if you are within a year if you are within 12 months of an election date, of municipal election date, then the board can defer filling it. And here's why. If my seat were vacant within the last couple of months, I would like for the board to be able to say, we're going to put the Ward 2 election as a special election on the same ballot as the at-large election in
That's what
October.
it says, regularly scheduled election.
Well, but it could be read to mean regularly scheduled for that seat. And that's why I think there's a subtle but meaningful difference between regularly scheduled election and municipal election date within a year. Okay, you follow? I mean, if there is a date on which any alderman is going to be elected within a year, then the board should be able to say, we're putting that seat, whether it's at large or ward, on that. It may be asynchronous, but it's an election opportunity, and that's what matters. And I don't want someone later to say, well, it wasn't a regularly scheduled ward election, so it's not the same.
Okay. And vice versa.
Yeah, either way that it works. I mean, whether it's
at-large.
And that's the very first time that I ran. We elected 5 aldermen the first year that I ran. Because I was on the ward election.
Yeah.
So it got changed somewhere?
I have no idea whether it got changed or not. All I'm saying is,
that's
how I got here.
First time.
First
Do you
time.
guys like the year? Do you like something smaller than a year, 6 months? Like I said, most everyone else does 6 months.
I'm fine with a year.
I'm fine with a year.
I saw some others that had a year or more.
I like a year, and here
I can give you this. It's 3 pages of just about everybody around here.
I like a year.
Well, I was talking about
Wait. I got somebody speaking down here.
Okay. The year is good because you can go pick up and get on the ballot for October next month, I think. Okay, and so if you're out there able to qualify for the seat, then we ought not be, in my view,
do 6 months.
Unless I'm wrong, you can pick up a ballot, you can pick up a qualifying petition, I think in April, and you have to turn it in by July. So April to, I'm okay with a year because I don't want, I'm reluctant to make an incumbent out of thin air during an election process.
Okay. The only other thing some people do, when they're required to fill a vacancy, they set a limit on how many days they give themselves. And then if they don't fill it within that period of time, they're mandated to do a special election. I want to throw that out there and tell you people do that. I don't think that's something you want to do, but people do it. A lot of people have at least some sort of limit. Like if we don't fill it within 90 days, it will go to a special election. It's out there. People do that. I think your process of requiring people to submit applications and doing interviews will probably put you outside of that time frame. Could, if that's the way.
Well, that is not. That is just something we did, though. It's not required.
It's not required. It's not required. But
I think it worked well, though.
It takes some time.
Well, it does work better, and in the event we were ever to appoint an alderman, I would encourage that any board would do that, because there's nothing more shady looking than showing up and names that hadn't been circulated publicly suddenly become aldermen. Not that we have ever done that, but I would think that...
I've been observing for 40 years. It
happens.
Well, I say we, meaning no board that
we've not done that.
Any other comments?
The only other thing, there's two other things. The first one is, do you want to make a distinction between at-large and ward? Do you want to say that if it's within a year, you will fill the ward? You don't want to leave a ward open that long. Now, the way this ordinance reads, you can still, or the charter change reads, you can still fill. You're not required.
You can do that.
You can do it within a year if you want to. You don't, but you're not required to by the way this ordinance is being changed. Do you want to make a difference between a ward and an at-large? It's up to you.
I think not, and the reason is because it's difficult for me to say whether it is worse that a ward be empty or that people who don't live in the ward pick the ward alderman. So I just think the greater flexibility that you leave yourself, the circumstances will probably suggest the answer.
You're not limiting yourself by
right. That's what I mean. I don't want to create a distinction between ward and at large, because even without knowing who it might be, I tend to trust the collective judgment of a board to not be bound. I could live without this, frankly, but the fewer requirements that you impose upon a board for circumstances that we cannot foresee, the better, in my view.
But the way it is now, we have a choice. Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine.
It does say, no, it just says May now. Whenever you were saying people from all over.
I'm not sure whether it is worse that let's say that heart attack had killed me, okay? I'm not sure whether it is worse that Ward 2 go unrepresented briefly until a next election, or that people who don't live in the ward, the rest of you, pick the ward alderman.
But you can still do special elections.
You could. You could. I just don't know which ones.
A ward election?
Yeah, special election.
That's what we're saying.
That's what I'm saying, though. I don't want a board to look at a charter and say, well, we now have to appoint someone.
And we probably don't need to spend $25,000 on an election.
That's about $25,000 to $35,000. That's about how much they cost. The only other thing.
Go ahead.
Some people say that if there's, and I don't know how often this would happen, but they say that the first alderman that's a seat that's vacant, they will fill it by these methods. But if there's a second one, or any more after that, they have to go to a special election. So if they all start dropping, if you guys all start, all quit. If you don't quit, that you have to do it by special election. So that way, if there's nobody here to vote on it.
What a rosy scenario.
We could go to Illinois, I guess, couldn't we?
Well, I think the point is if everybody quit, there's no option. It will be a special election. It doesn't leave options. You do a special election after number 2. I don't know if that's something you're interested in. We found that several people do that.
Well, they sometimes though there are only 5 members.
That's true. And sometimes only 3.
Yeah, so in that case that would be different.
I just thought maybe they meant with the whole group quit. You just all decided to quit.
We all got mad. That would have happened Tuesday night if.
Did I see a motion down there?
Yeah. I move that we. Well, we're not voting.
This is a work session. This is a work session.
I was thinking a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Certainly don't.
Recognized, and thank you.